Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at these outlier definitions. So we messed around a little bit with outliers and saw that they do, in fact, influence the line, the slope, the line intercept, as well as obviously the relationship itself and the strength of it. But there are some points that help and some points that don't. And so to call everything an outlier isn't totally fair to some outliers that don't really harm the relationship. So the College Board last year came up with some new definitions of outliers. And what certain points are called. And so this can be a little confusing as well. So I want to kind of show you how to break each definition down so you understand or hopefully understand or can try to visualize these different outliers. So the official definition of an outlier now is a point that does not follow the general trend. So that's something we kind of already know. But it also now has to have a large residual. So if the residual is not very large, then we don't really have an outlier. We might just have one of these other two things. So for an outlier, you now have to have both things. So let's look at this point. This is an example of an outlier because number one, up here is the pattern. So this is not fitting the pattern. It's very disconnected. But also what we want to notice is that this outlier is really far away from the line. So this is the large residual. So you want it to have a residual that's generally much larger than the other residuals that you see. So like these other lines here. And this one is like probably almost double some of these. So this would be an outlier. The second definition is what's called a high leverage point, and that's any point that you have that has a really large or small x value when compared to the other points. So let me switch colors here. I'm going to do this one in blue. So this is not an outlier anymore. Being disconnected from the pattern, but it does not have a large residual because it's real close to our least squares regression line. So this one is a high leverage point. So what you can also note is like this, think of this as like the x-axis down here. So like all my x values, like x values, y values. The x values for most of these points like stop here, but this point is like way far away from that too. It goes all the way up here. So this is an example looking this way of a high leverage point. So it's like moved way out, but it does still kind of fit the pattern that's there. So it just is disconnected from the data set, but it still generally follows the pattern of the data set. So the last one is an influential point. And basically, most of these are influential points. Basically, an influential point, kind of like it sounds, it influences things. So an influential point, if removed from the data set, changes the relationship. So examples of changes are slope, y-intercept, and or correlation. So any of these things or combinations of these things are called influential points. So obviously, our outlier here is going to change my slope maybe. It's not out super far, but it might cause a slight change in tilt, but it is going to cause my line to shift down to try to catch that point. So it's changing those things for sure. And then obviously it's far away from the pattern, so it's going to weaken it. So this is an influential point. That is also an outlier. This point is going to strengthen the relationship because it still fits the pattern enough. It's not really going to change the slope or the y-intercept, but it will change the correlation or the strength of the relationship. So this one is a high leverage point that is also an influential point because it's still causing a change. So these are our three definitions of outliers now. And obviously most outliers affect things, but it's just a matter of if it's a high leverage point that is affecting things or if it's an actual outlier that is influencing or affecting things.